and welcome back to the channel. This is the Mitsubishi T2. Now this footage has been sitting around in my hard drive for a good while. If you pay close attention, you can probably tell it's from before Ixwa Strike because of the old sounds. Nonetheless, this was a spectacular game and definitely worth showing. Now, I'm going to be going over both the Mitsubishi T2 and F1 in this video. In terms of flight performance, the planes are identical, and apart from differences in avionics and payload options, they might as well be the same plane. The T2 does get a co-pilot because it's the trainer variant, but at this battle rating, it's pretty rare for a pilot snipe to be the thing that takes you out, so it's not really an advantage. The two cockpits definitely look nice though. Now, if you can see from my airspeed indicator, the T2 is blisteringly fast, even for a battle rating 10.0. Also, at battle rating 10.0, it sees its fair share of downtiers, so its performance is actually noticeably good, at least in terms of speed and climb. In fact, when the T2 was first introduced, it was hands down the most powerful jet in the game, and though like the Sabre and Super Sabre before it, it has now been power crept into oblivion, you still get a taste of that old supremacy when you face stuff at 9.7 and below. Unfortunately, 10.0 means you also see frequent uptiers, and in a plane with only 2 AIM-9Es and no countermeasures at all, top tier is frankly torture. The T2 is fast enough to stay near Mach if you're careful with keeping your speed, so it's possible to outrun missiles like a starfighter. But if you want to get that Vulcan on target, you will have to turn, and this thing bleeds speed almost as fast as a MiG-21. What's worse, its tiny wings mean it doesn't retain its maneuverability at low speed at all, and its stall performance is rather awful, so you really can't rely on your ability to dogfight. This match, however, is a down tier.
Our victory is near.
You know, I've come to terms with the new gun sounds, but I do miss the old missile sounds. You can barely even hear them anymore, and I think the tone got removed, though that might be a bug. Anyhow, I digress. So let's talk about the M61 Vulcan. Excellent ballistics and a crazy fast fire rate. Great gun on paper. I absolutely hate it. And the reason I do is simple. It takes a fraction of a second to spool up. With all the deflection and snap shooting I like to do, I'm conditioned to pull the trigger at the last possible moment. And when the gun takes an extra moment to start firing, that means I miss a lot of easy shots. What makes it worse is the T2 has pretty poor nose authority, so trying to compensate when the enemy is pulling evasive is a pain in the ass. And don't let that ammo count fool you either. With the fire rate that this Gatling gun has, you'll still run out in no time, especially if you start spraying out of frustration. Now, while we watch me sweat bullets landing this thing while a MiG-21 circles the area, I'll give my opinion on the plane. I really do enjoy the T2. It's not a meta jet by any stretch of the imagination, and it gets totally outclassed by almost every MiG-21 variant, but its speed and energy retention mean that if you play it as a support fighter and boom and zoom the enemy, it's easy to stay out of reach, at least in a down tier. Even if you're forced into a dogfight, you can surprise your opponent by deploying flaps and using this thing's insane angles of attack to try to get a shot off before they run you out of speed. But the T2 also points out a glaring flaw in Gaijin's battle rating system, one that's become extremely obvious with the addition of top-tier missiles. As I said earlier, the T2 and the F1 are identical in flight performance, but the F1 gets AIM-9Ps, 4 of them. That's why it's at 10.3. Payload options alone elevate the plane's fighting potential. So why can't we do the same for top-tier jets stock versus spaded? Surely it wouldn't be too difficult to make it so that researching a certain armament modification increases the battle rating of the vehicle. Hell, you can even choose to remove the modification if you want to keep playing at the stock battle rating of the plane. Now, I know this might be a bit of a tall order with Gaijin involved, but I sincerely hope we see some changes along these lines soon. And as for that MiG-21 that's been circling the airfield, well, it really is a shame that you can't fire missiles when you're on the ground. And that was the end of that game. Let's hop in the F1. So as I mentioned earlier, the only real differences between the T2 and the F1 are the payload options. The F1 gets 4 AIM-9P sidewinders with a 20G overload, so they're comparable to the AIM-9Js on the F4E. The increased battle rating of 10.3 means you see up tiers basically every game though, and as much as I like the plane, I can't really recommend it, especially with this current repair bill being so high. You're basically a free kill for any Mirage or MiG-21 that decides to focus you, since you have no chance of outmaneuvering them, and you don't even have flares to dodge their missiles. Against Phantoms though, the F1 can hold its own, especially against players with no top tier experience who just got their hands on a shiny new German F4F, as you saw in the intro. In the rare down tier that you do get though, the F1 is borderline overpowered. This thing with AIM-9Ps against battle rating 9.3s really feels like shooting fish in a barrel, and this game is a good demonstration. Now, with battle rating compression being what it is, there are still several planes that can give you a run for your money in the F1, even in a down tier. Those being the MiG-19s, the Su-17, and the F-104s. The early MiG-21, F-13, and PFM are less of a threat because of their slow acceleration and crappy missiles, but they're also still deadly in a dogfight. The Su-17 in particular is quite dangerous. In fact, they kind of outdo the F-1 in almost every respect, with a faster top speed and missiles of the same caliber. I haven't met too many players flying the Su-17 who really seem to abuse its advantages, however, and they're more of a nuisance than anything else because their airspawn gives them such a crazy energy advantage at the start of the game. Because of how dangerous they are though, I try to chase them down when I can. This particular game, I do end up giving up. Eventually. Thankfully, there were still plenty of things to shoot by the time I got back to the battlefield. The Mitsubishi T2 and F1 are in a place of tension in the top tier meta. They're not quite good enough to go toe-to-toe with the true top dogs, but they're definitely too good to go against the stuff below them. If there's any plane that really exemplifies the battle rate and compression issues at top tier, it would probably be these. Nonetheless, I do quite enjoy the way that they fly, and they look damn sleek as well. If you're grinding top tier Japan, don't sleep on them. Thanks for watching.